The first speaker, as I said in this plenary, is Ms. Martina Anderson, who will be joining, as I said again, via Skype from Strasbourg, France. She is the chair of the European Parliament's Delegation for Relations with the Palestinian Legislative Council. She spent over 13 years as a political prisoner in England and Ireland, and was released in 1998. She immediately became involved in working with Sinn Féin after that, and was elected to the Northern Ireland Assembly as a Sinn Féin member for Foyle. In 2011, she became member of the European Parliament, and since 2014, she chairs the delegation on relations with the Palestinian Legislative Council. Madam, thank you very much. It's an honor for us to have you through via Skype this afternoon, though remotely. And again, it is an honor to have you, and the floor is yours.
Go mini me agah, which means thank you all in Irish. I hope you can hear me well. Unfortunately, I want to apologize in the first instance for not being able to spend more time with you, because just listening to your list of speakers, you're obviously going to have a very fruitful engagement. However, given my time frame, which I'm going to give you now, I need to be leaving the office at 15:45 or 15:50. We are having a debate tomorrow on the Middle East peace process. I am the negotiator for our group in GUI NGL. And directly after that, I will be going to meet with the High Representative Mogherini to express my concerns on a number of issues. The European Union, without doubt, has a vitally important role to play in the creation of environment that would allow us as MEPs to move towards a genuine and a contribution towards a genuine Middle East peace process, with a view to a just and a lasting and peaceful resolution. However, there is little doubt that the EU has been found wanting. The EU is the biggest donor of financial assistance to the Palestinians, but it is also Israel's biggest trading partner. EU relations with Israel are governed by what is called an association agreement, and this agreement allows for preferential trade between Israel and the EU. Article 2 of the association agreement states that the relations between the EU and Israel must be based on respect for human rights and democratic principles. The failure of the EU to react appropriately to Israel's many breaches of its commitment according to Article 2 of the Association Agreement sends Israel the message that its violations of basic principles of human rights are somewhat tolerated. I, along with other MEPs, have written and submitted parliamentary questions to the High Representative Mogherini, who I will be meeting at 5 p.m. today, in relation to a suspension of the association agreement with Israel on the basis of its Article 2 violations. Unfortunately, the responses received are vague and unsatisfactory, and have stated that she prefers, and some of you may understand this better than I, structured dialogue with Israel on these matters. Most disappointing for someone before she got the position expressed clear understanding of the Palestinian issue. I will be meeting with the High Representative, as I said so, this afternoon, and I will be raising with her the association agreement during the course of our discussion, among many other issues. The situation with the association agreement is a good example of how the role of the EU could be potentially transformative when it comes to relations between Israel and Palestine, if, for example, the EU suspended the association agreement. Unfortunately, The EU allows the situation in Palestine to worsen and acts as a mere bystander, observing the erosion of an Israeli political attacks on the two-state solution. Essentially, a suspension of the association agreement is really an issue of the EU abiding by its own rules and standards to which it has set itself. Such a suspension would force Israel to address, I believe, its breaches of human rights in the occupied territories. In July 2013, the publication of the guidelines for EU funding and eligibility for Israeli entities and their activities in the occupied territories was the non-recognition of Israel's right to the territories it's occupied since 1967, namely the West Bank, East Jerusalem, Gaza, and the Golden Heights. These guidelines were published because despite the EU's clear position on the occupied territories, EU funds are still going to settlements. The guidelines came about as a result of civic society and MEPs like myself and many others highlighting these contradictions and applying pressure. We must apply the same pressure outside and inside the institutions to get the association agreement suspended. In general, the EU's position on occupation is far from consistent. We only need to look at the reaction of the occupation of Crimea just over a year ago, in contrast to the occupation of the Palestinian territories since 1967. The EU has introduced a number of trade, economic and diplomatic sanctions on Russia for its role in Crimea. Conversely, after nearly 5 decades of Israeli occupation of Palestine and various other breaches of international and humanitarian law, the EU remains Israel's largest trading partner. 20% of Israel's total exports go to EU markets. If the EU is to deliver on its commitment stated at the onslaught on Gaza last summer, that a return to the status quo is not an option, then it has to take action against Israel for its violation of international humanitarian law. A good place, I suppose, to start would be the introduction of EU guidelines on labelling products coming from the occupied territories, which make it clear to EU consumers what products are being produced in illegal settlements. 16 EU foreign ministers wrote to Mogherini because they are exacerbated by her deferral of this issue, and 3 of the member states have already introduced their own voluntary guidelines. More importantly, such products coming from settlements should be banned on the basis that these settlements are illegal. This is the same rationale for the guidelines on EU funding, and this again is a matter of consistency or inconsistency between EU policy and practice. Despite the predominant role of the Council and the EU Commission on issues concerning Palestine, there is an important role for the European Parliament in effecting positive change and promoting the two-state solution. Although we are very concerned, I was in Palestine in March of this year when the elections took place, and we all heard what Netanyahu said about the two-state solution being over. Unfortunately, this particular parliament has moved further to the right. I didn't think that was possible in the last mandate, but it is, than the legislation that preceded it. And we saw a manifestation of this recently with the establishment of a new far-right group in the European Parliament. The dominance of the centre-right and far-right makes it more difficult to get cross-party gripping support for resolutions that are sufficiently robust to condemn the consistent violation of international and humanitarian law by Israel, and which criticises EU's lack of willingness to push Israel to comply with international law. That said, there is still a lot of work that can be done here. And today's event, I think, is an example of that. We should not understand the value of conferences or underestimate the value of conferences like you're having here and my participating in that conference. And we can identify and understand the challenges that we face and the opportunities that must be captured. For our part as MEPs, particularly the Irish MEPs and Sinn Féin and our group that we are a member of, GUI-NGL, which has 52 MEPs, we play a very important role in scrutinising the policies being promoted by the Commission. When we identify discrepancies or contradictions, and there are many, we highlight and expose them and build political strength to confront them, as is in the case of the EU-Israeli Association Agreement or the issue of the labelling of products coming from settlements. Our role has been and must continue to be a thorn in the side, so to speak, of the unelected bureaucrats that drive EU policy on the Middle East. A number of months ago, I collected signatures from MEPs for a letter to Federica Mogherini regarding Horizon 2020 funding, which is one of the biggest funding programs here in the European Parliament, and that funding going to Israeli identities, and concerns from civic society organisations that funding may still be going to companies involved in the military industry. The High Commissioner replied with the familiarly vague response, "We have been in contact with the Palestinian civil society to gather significant evidence to challenge their almost lacklustre response here in the Parliament. It is a priority for me as chair of the delegation that any Israeli organisation complicit in or promoting or profiting from the occupation of Palestinian land receives no support or assistance whatsoever from the European institutions. We cannot and we will not take it for granted that the publication of the guidelines for EU funding guarantees that such funding will not find its way into the hands of those complicit in occupation. We continue to protest at the unacceptable situation where the Israeli authorities refuse to give permits to those official EP European Parliament delegations visiting and trying to enter Gaza. Despite the fact that we have been democratically elected, I led a delegation of 13 MEPs to Palestine last year at the time of the onslaught, and we were refused access to Gaza. And as chair of the Palestinian delegation, I have been refused access to Gaza on a number of occasions. That the EU fails or refuses to penalise Israel for this is absolutely unacceptable. I and other MEPs of the European Parliament delegation to Palestine met with the President of the European Parliament, Martin Schulz, to raise our concerns about this and many, many other issues. Since then, the President has proposed a delegation to Gaza comprising of the chairs of the Foreign Affairs, the Budget and the Development Committee, but not myself as chair of the Palestinian Committee, to travel to Gaza as a door opener, as what they hope is going to be a door opener. We're just concerned that it might tick a box and then none of us will ever get access for another number of years. It remains to be seen whether this is going to have the required effect if not, but we're still encouraging them to go ahead. This would not have happened if it hadn't been for the intervention of ourselves as MEPs. And delegation visits to Palestine have a dual purpose of raising awareness of the terrible situation there within the EU institutions and also bringing to light the various human rights and international law abuses to the peoples that we represent in our constituencies. That's a very important point because people power, we've seen them standing shoulder to shoulder in their millions across Europe when Gaza was being attacked. When the forces of the people are loud and very loud and speak in unison, like they did during and after the onslaught in Gaza last summer, EU ministers and governments and leaders are obliged to act, even if it is somewhat reluctantly. This was clearly evident in a number of parliamentary resolutions calling for the recognition of Palestinian statehood and the resolution passed by the European Parliament, although it is not the competency of the European Parliament to give such recognition, it is up to member states. But at the same time, what we were able to do was to put a focus and pressure on those member states. So as chair of the Palestinian delegation, there is not a week, there is not even 2 or 3 days that go past without me being involved in highlighting, unfortunately, another human rights breach by Israel, or that I'm confronting the Commission here or facilitating a meeting about a Palestinian issue. So I want to thank you. So I want to thank each and every one of you for the opportunity to address you all here today. And I think it's not that I'm into receiving any praise whatsoever. I do what I have to do, and I do it with a heart and a half. But it is Sinn Féin conference, Ardash, last year, I was really touched by the fact that the Palestinian ambassador has said that they realised that they have one MEP, a Palestinian MEP in the European Parliament, and she was called and is called Martina Anderson. So that to me meant a lot. So thank you for the opportunity to address you here today, and if I can answer any of your questions, I will do so.
I would like to thank Ms. Anderson for her presentation and for making the time to be with us despite her busy schedule at the European Parliament in Strasbourg. We definitely appreciate the work of the European Parliament in pushing member states towards recognizing the state of Palestine and achieving the two-state solution. I hope you don't mind to stay for a little bit while with us, Ms. Anderson, and I do believe there will be some interest in the form of questions or comments from the floor. The floor is open. I know Mr. Palestine will take the floor, but I'll give him the last to speak later. You.
No, I'm not.
Would any line? Yes, I recognize Mr. Ardi Imses. The floor is yours. Mr. Ardi Imses.
Thank you so very much. I'd like to thank you very much for the presentation. A quick question. It seems only obvious to me now based on what you said, but a confirmation from you. These guidelines on funding, I take it by virtue of the fact that they're merely guidelines. They're not binding on any EU institutions. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct. That said, they had sent shockwaves to the Israeli authorities at the time. They didn't actually think that even the European Parliament would issue such guidelines, such as the relationship that they have with particularly the heads of state here in the Parliament. And they are very actively involved in engaging with other MEPs here and trying to have MEPs to be their voice in the Parliament. But even though they're only guidelines, they have still provoked a reaction in the Parliament that has enabled us to ensure that, well, we have been challenging President Mogherini to ensure that funding does not go into the settlements. She is telling us that that is not the case. We are working with the Palestinians because we don't believe that response that we got, insofar as maybe she isn't equipped with the evidence. But we need evidence, and we've been asking the Palestinians to give us the evidence to be able to demonstrate that despite the guidelines, that there is still European funding going to Israel in the entities that they have that are legal and that they occupy, and that we ourselves will be able to then use that to prevent such funding, because despite the fact that there are only guidelines, there are guidelines that have been endorsed by the majority of the MEPs, and the MEPs do not want to see European funding like that going to the illegal settlements.
Thank you very much, Ms. Anderson. Ms. Anderson, while waiting for some others to take to also pose the question, I'm just wondering if you could enlighten us what has been the dynamic within the discussion within the European Parliament with regard to the settlement of and also two-state solution. You have mentioned a little bit about the center right, far right, and also what would be the future of the discussion within the European Parliament, taking into account the fact that some of the MPs, let's say from France, from Sweden, they are more progressive, they are more friendly, and they are more sympathetic to the cause of the Palestinian.
I'm very sorry I didn't get all of that question. Was it in relation to the two-state solution? Maybe could you summarize it for me?
Right. My question is, if you could share with us the dynamic within the European Parliament. You mentioned earlier about the settlement, about the center right, the far right, but what is the dynamic and how you foresee for the future, taking into account that some of the MPs from, let's say, from France, Sweden, they are more sympathetic to the Palestinian cause?
Well, one of the things that we rely very much on is civil society and civic society within our own member states and regions to be able to track what we are doing as MEPs. Some people, MEPs, hide behind the fact that this is Europe, and it's as if someone else in Europe is taking those decisions, but we have got now joint authority here insofar as the MEPs been given authority in decision-making processes. That wasn't the case many, many years ago. So what I tried to do as chair of the delegation is to ensure, for instance, when we're putting resolutions through, that the votes have to be recorded. We would send that information to groups and organisations, because you will find that whatever about MEPs, they don't like to be scrutinised in their own constituency. They're very mindful of the fact that there were millions on the streets across Europe at the horrific scenes every minute of every hour of every day. The truth of what was happening in Gaza was being put out in the social media, and I believe the Israelis were having to chase after the truth, and people could see the horror of what was happening, and the people were reacting. So what we have relied upon is ensuring that I have the groups and organisations well briefed, well informed, up to speed with what has happened, and we are saying people power. And unfortunately, you can see it even on the refugee crisis. You know, that 3-year-old boy that broke all of our hearts, that was washed up like a wave in Turkey, should have been playing on a beach. And the horror of that image has provoked and changed the migration policy in some member states, insofar as we could not, despite the fact I went to Lampedusa, I've been to Italy, I'm going to Jordan next week, particularly in relation to those Palestinians who are refugees in different places and the other refugees as well. And we've been crying out for a change in policy. But it was the people reacting and responding that provoked other MEPs here that would like to hide behind that it's the Commission or it's the Council that's making the decisions, not them. So what we have been saying, that the EU needs to become a real player in the Middle East peace process, because they need to support a meaningful efforts for a comprehensive solution. Like, there has been 4 EU Council conclusions on the Middle East peace process, one in 2009, 2011, 2012 and 2013. And finding a lasting peace between Israel and Palestine is a target of the international community and a declared position of the EU. And the European Parliament has repeatedly expressed its support for a 2-state solution. However, we have concerns about the information we received last week. There was a joint committee meeting that I held with the Israeli delegation, the Palestinian delegation, and we received a briefing at that meeting, and we were told quite clearly that a peace process is not on the foreign policy agenda of Israel. Now, I was quite taken aback by that revelation. I shouldn't be surprised, but I was. And when I received that information, along with listening to the comments that was made in the 2-state solution, then I think without doubt that what we need is Palestine should be placed under international protection. And that's what I'm trying to push forward, as well as countless other issues, whether it's settlements, prisoners, administrative detention, the draconian and the harsh measures that this new administration is putting in place. There's a list of issues that I've been trying to raise, as well as about getting access to Gaza, all of crucial concern to us, and particularly our party, Sinn Féin, and the group that we're here involved in. So you can rest assured, despite the fact that this Parliament has come back more right-wing and very conservative and want to sort of take a back seat, and nearly Gaza and Palestine has gone off their radar and will come on their radar. Unfortunately, I don't even like to say this, but I believe that somewhere the next time it will be attacked from Israel. And now they're focused on other things. But you can rest assured that as a chair of the Palestinian delegation, I am working damn hard to ensure that MEPs and these institutions will not get an opportunity to put the Palestinian issues and Palestine really at the back of their minds.
Thank you very much, Ms. Anderson. Ambassador Riyad Mansour.
Ms. Anderson, I am the ambassador of the State of Palestine to the United Nations. I want to thank you very much for this principled position. We are meeting in Brussels in order to discuss issues related to bringing Israel into compliance with its obligation under international law to stop illegal settlements and to remove this obstacle from the path of a meaningful political process. I think your effort and the effort of many of your colleagues, members of the European Parliament, in trying really to implement policies of the European Union, including in the guidelines, and not only but labeling, products from settlements, but also advancing it to eventually not allowing products from an illegal entity to be put in markets in Europe. What we hope that there will be a political will by European governments and by other governments to implement policies in a practical way, leading to putting Israel in such a way that either they meet their obligations under international law or there will be consequences. I know that the position is more advanced among sectors within the European Parliament, and we appreciate that. It is more in line with the feeling of the Palestinian people in the occupied territory. But we need help from everyone. We need you also to help us in seeing the Europeans investing in peace by recognizing the state of Palestine. It doesn't make sense that the last block of countries in one continent, in Western Europe, are not yet taking that step of investing in peace through recognition of the state of Palestine. If all of us believe in two-state solutions, a state has been in existence since 1948, recognize the other state as an investment in peace, as an investment in defending the two-state solution. I know that you are in the forefront in doing these things. We appreciate that, but we need you today and your colleagues more than ever. Are we going to succeed today in removing this major obstacle from the path of peace? Are we going to succeed in having political will to bring Israel into compliance with its obligation under international law and under international humanitarian law, or are we going to fail in this exercise? I think that the success in addressing that issue will be the issue that we need to address if we truly want to help the Palestinian people to live in dignity and freedom and to live in their own independent state of Palestine with East Jerusalem as its capital. So we appreciate your effort, your help, and we need your help more now because we are going through a very critical stage. Our people want peace. They don't want to follow extremism in our region, but they cannot do it alone. They need their help. the help of all of their friends, and you are in the forefront of such friends. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Since I do not see any delegation who would like to take the floor. All right. I'll give to the left first. I would like to invite Mr. Sawan Jabarin.
I would like to thank you for your position, and I think by doing that and your colleagues, you maintain the hope in people's minds, because people, I think, they lost their hope in Palestine and elsewhere. I have two things. If the parliament can make like a statement or a call or anything like that, there are many charities and organizations in Europe and rest of Europe, you know, they are enjoying free taxes, and in the same time, they are helping and investing and contributing to the settlements in different means, sometimes under which called the humanitarian support here or there. If there is a call, you know, to the member states just to take that in their account and to stop this. Another thing is the visa for the settlers, leaders, and those they are, you know, part of the crimes committing in the occupied territory against Palestinians. I think it's a time also for the settlers not to enjoying a free visa to come to Europe freely and to put them in the list of the terrorists. This is maybe an issue we would like to see in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to take another one. Ambassador Abdul Rahim Al Farah, Ambassador of Palestine in Brussels.
Je vous remercie, Madame Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Anderson. I'm the new Palestinian ambassador to the EU in Brussels. In fact, I've just arrived in time for this current conference. Thank you very much for everything that you are doing for Palestine. And I hope that as of tomorrow, we'll be able to call you the chair of European Parliament relations with Palestine, because I believe tomorrow there's going to be a vote on this. This is not just with the Legislative Council. You know that we are relying a great deal on you so that this resolution, the resolution is going to succeed. And also, we are relying on all our friends in the European Parliament so that an independent Palestinian state will be soon achieved. Thank you very much for what you're doing, Madam Anderson.
Thank you, Ambassador. Madam Anderson, do you need at least the gist of the last intervention? Then, yes. Then
Yeah,
I'll ask
please.
my colleague Laura from Secretary to explain.
Yes, Ms. Anderson, just to say the gist of Ambassador's point was, he was actually looking forward to the fact that the delegation will be soon called, hopefully after tomorrow's vote, delegation with relations with Palestine rather than the Legislative Council. And of course, he thanks you again for all that the delegation is doing. Thanks.
Yeah, can I just reply by just trying to capture some of the comments that was made there? I come from, as some people would maybe realise from the introduction, the north of Ireland. I have lived through and experienced conflict. I know the importance of having international friends to move a peace process forward. And I can tell you that Martin McGuinness, Jerry Adams, everyone in our party is very acutely aware of the role that I am playing. Within our group, there was an opportunity, almost like a choice, between becoming the Vice President of the European Parliament or becoming the chair of the Palestinian Delegation. And our party chose this. Such is the importance of the Palestinian struggle and its people. We know what it's like to emerge and the importance of emerging from conflict. And I can assure you, there will not be a week that will go by that I will not continue on. I don't need thanks. I'm doing it with a heart and a half. And I'm doing it for all the right reasons because I understand it so well. I understand about the prisoners in administrative detention. I understand hunger strikes. I understand the number of children who have been held. I was first arrested and I was 16 years of age myself. I've spent 13 and a half years in jail, 10 in an English prison. I've been through hundreds, countless numbers of strip search. And had anyone told me I'd be sitting here talking to you over Skype as a Sinn Féin MEP and the person from the north of Ireland who topped the poll when I was in Brixton prison slopping out because we had no toilets, I would have thought you were off your head. So in giving hope, I want to say it can change if there is a political will, and that's what we have to generate. Tomorrow, as you mentioned, we are taking a vote on the name of our delegation. When I tell somebody I'm the chair of the DPLC, they look at me and go, what is that? So we have to be able to perform our function as MEPs in a way that is compliant with the regulation around delegations. And I am telling people they shouldn't make this into a political football. They should allow us to be able to represent the area that we are there working as hard. And I think we are the hardest delegation that is working in the European Parliament for the people of Palestine. So I want to leave you with, I hope you enjoy the rest of your conference. I apologise that I'm only being able to do this over Skype. I hope to have an opportunity to meet you all sometime in the future. I intend to go to Palestine again early in 2016. We would be going earlier if we could, other than the European Parliament has changed the rules for all of the delegations, so it limits our interaction. We are not tourists. We don't go over there just as tourists. We go, our political tourists, we go over to try to see what we can learn and make sure that we exchange information and that we give your people the hope that they need to know that you have got maybe not enough of us, but you have got a substantive number of people in this parliament who care. And I can tell you, we punch above our weight. And we are ahead of the game with regards to the other MEPs because they need to get up early in the morning to try and keep up with us. So we are working very hard. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. How grateful the committee to have you among us here. You are very close to our heart. The committee certainly commends you and admires the work that you have done. And lastly, allow me to say, in the word that you understand, is Brea Liom 2. Am I right?
Wow.
Thank you.
Chuggy Arla, our day will come.
Thank you very much again. Thank you.
Thank you. Go meet him, Thank you.
Thank you.